Greetings survivors and friends, SHADOWFRAX here once again with your detailed weekly update to Rust. And would you like ice with that? Well, you can now because they're back! Icebergs have officially returned just in time for summer. If you're in the Northern Hemisphere, that is. So, as I explained in a recent video, the reason why they melted away in the first place was nothing to do with alleged climate change or seasonal weather variations, but instead because they didn't look cool enough to fit in with the graphics update. Nevertheless, here they are again, floating in the sea just off the north coast, and they're pretty much exactly as you remember them. You can still build on them in the same way, but thanks to the recent changes to ladder placement, they can no longer be considered OP. Plus the sea is blinking cold. If you don't know, the news is that new classier models for these are on the way, and this is only the tip, because the whole northern landscape is actually booked in for a complete overhaul in the near to medium future, so stay tuned. As it was the first update of the month, there were a lot of other changes to the island, and I'll get to those in a mo, but first, something that a lot of you will probably be more interested in, and that was the latest episode in the saga that is aim cones and recoil. So, just to recap, in the beginning, recoil was swapped out for aim cones / aim squares / aim horses, which was controversial, let's just say, and now it's time again for something new. Helk has targeted the issue this week by implementing the first phase of a learnable recoil system, and to start with, this is only on the MP5 and LR300, but if successful, will be extended to others. The nitty-gritty is that the max aim cones for these two have been reduced by 90%, and instead, with sustained fire, it's your view that will now bump around in a predictable and thus hopefully learnable pattern. The idea is that as this is less of an RNG system, with practice you'll get better and better at it, and each weapon will have its own pattern, meaning your efforts will be rewarded. This is an ongoing exercise which will be tweaked depending on feedback received, and patterns will likely change a lot, so don't get too good at them yet, will you? There were some improvements to the Whacker Node minigame that was introduced last week, namely new hotspots will no longer appear on the complete opposite side, making you have to orbit them like a small moon. Instead, they'll always appear within about a foot of the last one. We now have completely new node models too. Pointier, sexier, ruggeder, nodier. Plus, they're a lot easier to tell apart now. Gone are the old lumpy round monstrosities that you knew and perhaps loved, so sorry if you did. To complement these, rock formations around the island are also a bit more defined, and colours have changed somewhat too, resulting in a more natural look. Elsewhere, grass had a slight strim and is now 10% shorter than it was before. Work's been going on behind the scenes to allow the mountain splat maps from Happis to be used in procedural island generation 2, and this also helps pave the way for other features later, such as biome-specific mountain designs. Junk pile spawn rates along roads have been increased this week to ensure an adequate supply of components and other crap on busy servers, and over at the launch site, finally, the offices have been dressed with an extremely classy array of retro furniture, posters, computers, telephones, and pot plants. It's still hard to believe this is what pocket calculators looked like in the 60s and 70s, isn't it? Amazing. In addition to the improvements to Whacker Node, survey charges also got some love this week, with craters now being analyzable. Basically, go up to one and hold E, and after a few seconds you'll receive a note telling you what elements you can expect to get out of it and at what rate. The idea behind this is also that maybe at some point you'll be able to see the distance to the main deposit, meaning that with trial and error you'll eventually locate the mother lode, but that's another story for another time. To go along with this though, quarries underwent a bit of a change too. Yields were increased, and for instance static ones at warehouses should now produce 5 times as much stone per minute as they used to, which means that those willing to risk it for a biscuit could score a hefty bucket of rocks along with all other resource types. By contrast, placed quarries will give the same amount of stone as before, but now additional resources are dependent on which biome they're in. You should only get metal from the temperate biome, sulfur from the arid, and HQ in the frozen north. Plus, you'll only get one extra type of resource from each in addition to rocks from here on in. In general though, you should notice they produce more resources, especially sulfur and stone. In other gameplay adjustments, Gary continues to fiddle around behind the rusty curtains, and this week has been working on achievements. You'll notice that so long as you're on an official server, you'll start earning a few for completing basic tasks. These are actual Steam achievements, I might add, and are designed as part of the ongoing drive to give some sort of guide and purpose for new players, and will eventually scale all the way up to building a secure base. There was until now a 500 player limit on servers thanks to Valve, but this has been lifted and you can have more on your server if you want. Although I'm not predicting there'll be that many of those. Also, players holding guns will now always have them at the ready pose when crouched or crouch walking. In performance, garbage collection, which is public enemy number 1 when it comes to issues during PvP, is in the crosshairs, and the metric that Facepunch are most interested in is the amount of managed memory being allocated when things get bad. This can jump up under certain circumstances, and if you want to help identify these bottlenecks, it would be rather decent of you to file an in-game report using F7 and tell the chaps as much as you can about what was happening when things went pear-shaped for you. Texture memory usage was another area that received some love this week. You see, up until now, all quality presets except for Fast and Potato were using the maximum texture resolution. This means that even if you were only using the simple graphics setting, you would still see the same textures as the fantastic one, and so obviously this caused problems for some. Something else designed to free memory and speed up loading is that now only the monuments actually being used on an island will be loaded at startup instead of all of them. Specular values were apparently a bit skew-if as well, but this was resolved in the update, meaning that you'll notice some better shines and deeper contrasts on terrain. Added to this, reflection shadowing should work properly in most cases now when the sun is obscured by a mountain, say, as this example shows. And distant terrain seams were fixed, if that's something that ever actually bothered you. Over to works in progress now, and smalluments, or small monuments for those of you with more time to say things, are being produced. These are a new batch of loot hotspots that will be found along roads, and like the harbours, are designed with fresh spawns in mind. The archives of Concept Limbo have been raided, and to start with, in the next few weeks you'll see a small town, a petrol station, and a sperm ket, which I'm assuming is Russian for value or something. But watch this space and I'll keep you informed. The scientists and Bradley are hopefully arriving very soon, but still require a bit more spit and polish before they're ready for the limelights. Nav meshes and especially the transitions between them are taking a bit of time to get right, but it will all be worth it in the end, I'm sure. Lastly, last week I mentioned a new makeshift backpack that's being worked on, and here is how it's going so far. The concept this was taken from was quite old, and artistic license has been well and truly taken, with one of the rope arm straps having been replaced with an old jumper cable. The base is all patched up with duct tape, and it's been deliberately made to look like it has something inside it already to prevent it from looking too floaty when worn. I'm intrigued to see how this turns out and what we can do with it, but stay tuned and I'll let you know when it's in the bag. Hoof those like and subscribe buttons if you'd be so kind. Let me know what you thought of this week's update too, and please consider joining me on Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, and the Steam group. Links are in the description. I shall catch you all in my next vid or stream, but until then, keep calm and stay rusty. Cheerio.